Hey there, Amy. Welcome to the Making Math Moments That Matter podcast. We are excited to, talk to you about your journeys, and I'll say journeys plural because you've got,
Mm,
you've got a journey on your hands, and I think you're currently still on this journey. We want to share, what you've been learning on this journey with the Math Moment Maker community. So before we dig into all of that, do us a favor, introduce yourself to the audience, and then whereabouts in the world are you coming from?
Well, thank you very much. My name is Amy Bride, and I have been teaching in Northern Massachusetts for 24 years about. I started as a first grade teacher, and then I became a fourth grade teacher because I got my principal's license, and so I needed a little more diversity in my teaching background. So I did fourth grade, then fifth grade, back to fourth, and became a district math coach because I was
nice.
working with the fourth grade and became really curious about math. So then I became the district math coach. And as the district math coach, I became even more curious about math. So then I wondered how math was taught in other countries. And so this year I've been taking a year's leave to do a sabbatical type research on watching 9-year-olds learn math.
I love it. I love it. I am so interested in digging into your math moment because when you had said that you had been teaching in first and fourth and fifth and then back to fourth, and then you were sort of intrigued by mathematics. I don't want to say too much more because I don't want me to make any assumptions here, but I'm curious. It sounds to me like you may have been more recently intrigued by mathematics than, say, when you began your career. But I want you to unpack for us when we say math or math class, what moment pops into your mind that you remember from your learning experience?
Flashcards. As a third, fourth grade student, you had to know your multiplication facts.
Exhilarating.
Not.
Yeah. Now, a
But
quick question. Tell
yeah,
me more about
no,
that. Like,
that
was
was
it a
it.
good or a bad thing?
Flashcards.
Good or
Well,
bad? How, like, what did that do for you when you
Right.
think about it? Are you thinking like, because John was the kid that actually like liked it because it was like that was affirmation that like
I
I've
got
got
stickers.
this.
I got
But for
stickers.
other kids, it's the opposite, right? It's like, oh my gosh, I'm like horrible at this. I'm not a math person. So what was that like for you? And then take us a little further down the road to like, what does that mean for you when you got into education? And I guess comparing to where you are now and what you're focusing in on.
so flashcards were originally an easy win. Every Friday we had the multiplication test. I could memorize the facts for that,
Mhm.
20 problems in a minute or whatever
Right.
they would do, kind of thing. So that was sort of an easy win until you had to use it for something better.
Right.
And you had to use it going forward, like for the long division and those kinds of things.
Yeah.
Where I noticed flashcards constantly coming back to me is in my travels for fourth grade math, because often the students in my classes may or may not know their math facts. And then traveling and learning now, the way I've been using and learning and doing math is through the newer methods that I might not know the fact, but I might know a helper fact, or I might know a way to arrive at the answer by using some other method than just memorizing. And so that really became kind of the start of my excitement for math. Like I had never thought about multiplication problems other than memorizing and then using them for
Right.
something else. And then when I started seeing there are so many other ways to do it, I thought that was really exciting. It made me more curious. And then I was wondering, like you're saying, I'm on several journeys. On this
Mhm.
journey this year, I'm in Greece right now, coming to you from Leros Island. And I was just wondering how other countries do
Yeah.
their math facts, because that's a very, very common math standard in every country that I've been to in Europe so
Right.
far,
Yeah. Yeah. And
especially at that
yeah,
age.
yeah. And I want to dig in on that experience, and specifically we can talk multiplication, but other things, because I think we in classroom teachers in North America, and I wonder this for a long time, is because we used to have international students come to us and be a part of our classrooms for a month, 2 months, sometimes a semester, sometimes a year, and you often wondered, like, what is happening outside of, our bubble, our bubble here in our little town, and then our bubble here in our province or our state. And then it's like, well, what else is happening in our bubble in the country or North America? It's we tend to kind of like live in our bubbles, but we often kind of go, these are the students I see on a regular basis, and year after year after year, you see similarities in students, but they're all from the same place. They're all, you're not tend to not move around a ton. Now, if you do, you're probably seeing similarities within the country. But so this is why I thought this was gonna, we wanted to kind of chat with you about this, is to think like, what is some of those differences? Like, what are we seeing outside of the country? Like we all grew up with flashcards. Like it's the thing, like we all learned through flashcards, and we're on, most of us who are listening to this podcast right now are on the journey that you're saying is we are looking at and exploring different strategies and helper facts. I like that, that term that you used to solve a problem or complete a multiplication statement. And so I'm gonna throw it back at you. You were on this journey. You were in Greece. I think you were in Italy before this. There was a couple other countries you're bouncing around to, and like, what are you seeing? Let's talk specifically multiplication. Like, are you seeing flashcards in these classrooms? Are you seeing the strategies that we're focusing on here in our classrooms? Talk to us about like what you're actually seeing and what you're seeing kids do.
Yes to all of that.
So-
So I have seen flashcards used, say,
Right.
as the start of a lesson or the end of a lesson. I've seen teachers, randomly call out facts, that kind of thing.
Right.
I've also seen where in certain countries, like in Italy, in Spain, and Denmark, they asked me how I would teach it.
Okay.
And so they asked me to show them what they would do. And it was sort of similar in a lot of ways. Like in Germany, they used what I called the helper fact. So if they were doing like 12 times 6, they would do, 10 times 6 and 2 times 6. Now add those together to get the 72. Once,
Right.
and they would do that. That was the way they would start their lessons, things like that. Often the multiplication was used at the start of the lessons. In Croatia, I saw them using here they don't drink the water out of the tap in a lot of the places I've visited in Europe. So they use plastic bottles, and they have the plastic bottle tops that the teacher had kept, and just kept a collection, a massive collection of them, and used those to create arrays so students could see multiplication
Right.
facts as they were laid out in arrays. And then she was working with the properties of multiplication to get like, see how you can arrange it this way to make the distributive property, that kind of thing. And so it was really interesting in that way. I've also seen that some people are using starting or sort of beginning with the building thinking classrooms, and with knowing Joe Buller. In Sweden, there's a woman named Ulla Oldberg, and she has something called seeing math. And so she does, it's very similar things, very much in line with all those math is figure outable, Pam Harris type things. And in Spain and in Germany, I also saw the open number line and things like that for when they would try and add to get to they would separate the number, and then they would try and add it back to get to the product in the end. And so there were so many different ways that were all very much aligned with what we are doing. There is also traditional. And so I saw all of that.
So I'm super curious, because what it sounds like to me at this is very high level, is that there's a lot of what you're seeing here in North America. But what I'm wondering is, anecdotally, what is your thought, and this you're probably going to run into availability bias here because you're only seeing so many classrooms in so many places. But I'm wondering, like, what are you seeing that is maybe standing out to you? Are you seeing some similarities to what you notice going on here? Like, and I'll give you an example here just to hopefully articulate my question a little more is, you know, when I walk into a classroom and I see, you were talking about flashcards, when I see sort of this, you know, rote practice. What I don't see is I don't see kids sort of like engaging in math discourse at that time. Doesn't mean it's not happening any other times. Or I don't see students with like these big smiles on their faces, like they're just jumping for joy. What are you noticing? What's standing out to you about some of the things that you're seeing that maybe are similar? And then maybe contrast that with maybe some of the things that are different that maybe are standing out to you as well.
Standout idea comes from Prague. And
Okay.
they were using something called the Haney method. This professor at the university there, I think it's the Charles University, he started this teaching method. And I saw students cheering for math class, literally cheering. And they did this beautiful thing of making math a story that, you know, how we strive for that. And they did this beautiful thing of making every part of that math lesson a story. Granted, I only was there a short time, like you said, that I've only hit the tip of the iceberg here. And I just want to keep going and going.
Right.
But the this Haney method was beautiful at showing math as a story. And so in the beginning of one lesson, the teacher sat down, the students were in a circle on the rug with the teacher, and she had a hat, and underneath the hat, she was telling a story. Now, this is all in Czech. I can't understand a single thing. And I'm just sitting there waiting with bated breath to see what they're going to do. And I see that the teacher is saying something about her sons or something like that. She has kids or somehow I figured that out. And under the hat, she has 6 sets of socks. And she says that she has 2 sons. And so this student gets all excited. They're all talking to each other. And then they share out that each son could get 3 pairs of socks because she has 6 socks, 2 sons. And then they write it on the board and then they share it and continue to do it that way. And so it was the story around that that kept the students engaged. And then in another classroom in Prague, I saw something that hits on the culture, the culture of life there, because the students ride the public bus to get to school there. And so they have a game called Bus Stop, where the students they just took a random box, made it a bus, and then the students came in with toilet paper rolls and made them into people riding the bus. And there are more than themselves. And then it goes into positive and negative numbers that way, because the number of people getting on and the number of people getting off at the bus stop, again, cheering for math in that classroom. So I would say that Prague was definitely a standout as far as the cheering for math. Sorry, go back to your other part of the question.
So it was just
I get so excited.
Yeah, it was no
I love it.
thinking about differences. So I think you kind of saying like it sounds like what you're saying is teaching through story is, and I would agree with this too, is that it's not very common over here. We're not seeing that on a regular basis, whereas you saw that in Prague as like a standout moment, a memorable moment, you know, for you. That's different than say what's happening, you know, at home on a regular basis. And so that was that question was like, well, what are you seeing that's like standing out as something that you were like, hey, because part of it is I know that you're going to go back and to be the coach in your home district. So it's kind of like, well, what are you bringing back with you? Like, what do you see as like those things that we like, that was a standout moment. That's actually a really great strategy here that I haven't seen before. And, you know, and that's really the question is, so what else is kind of standing out as like, these are things that I'm seeing that I normally don't see, that I wish more teachers from North America would do or be exposed to?
The exposure piece is huge, because the impact of culture on math, what's that Schoenfeld's cultural surround? You know how important all that is. I would not have known that had I not done this, because one of the schools I went to, I was connected with from a former student who is German. And he was the most fantastic student, rule follower, wanting to succeed, persevered, always trying to get to the right answer. And I had no idea. I just thought he was a great student, right? And then I get to Germany, and that is the cultural norm. The same thing in Scandinavia. They have this cultural way of being that's a very collectivist way of being, rather than I'm clearly used to the North American individual style, whereas the kids in one of the schools that I went to, the teacher left the room for a few minutes and everybody just kept on going and nobody had a problem. They were just sort of helping each other. And I was happily impressed with her discipline in it. And everybody said, that's not discipline, that's young Tirol. That's just our cultural way of being.
Right. I love that. I love that. It reminds me when I was in Norway, I did that NorCan project. We actually have an episode where we brought Craig Guthrie on and we had Jim Strachan, who was a part of the NorCan project. And you reminded me of this one classroom we were visiting. We walked into the classroom and the kids were there, and I'll be honest, it looked like a North American classroom from a work ethic, sort of what you would anticipate. So there were some kids kind of, joking around a little bit, and then it was a group of kids kind of working hard, and just a typical thing that you might see in a typical classroom, where and no behaviors by any means. So we're not talking about this being a wild class by any means. It was just kids doing their thing. They were high school students, probably around a grade 10 age. And I walked up to one of the students and I said, well, where's your teacher? Your teacher's not here. And the student's like, yeah, he is. And I'm like, no, there was nobody here. He's like, he's on the tour with you. And I turned around and the teacher, that was his class. And they just didn't have a teacher that day. So they came to class. And, imagine that in a North American classroom.
Oh
it's
my
like,
God.
no, you can't open the door to the classroom because of, liability and because of all of these things.
Yes.
And this group had come in. There was what they needed to do up on the board and kind of what they needed to work on independently. Now, again, I want to clarify, though, it wasn't like you could hear a pin drop and everyone was doing exactly what they were supposed to do. They were being teenagers, but very appropriately. And it just sort of, hit me when you were describing that scenario that, this particular class, that they were, trusted in order to be able to come into class and do what they need to do. And ultimately at the end, there was some accountability there. But this sort of sets me up for the next, question I have for you is what are you seeing in terms of, we'll call it overall work ethic, or maybe I'll call it the value that the students, which of course would be instilled by teachers and parents and so forth, in terms of math studies. In certain countries, that is a really important thing. And it's very, students are very focused and honed in. I'm wondering, what are you noticing? Do you, when you walk into a classroom, feel like it just feels kind of like a typical North American classroom? Or are there any sort of standouts that you're noticing where students are maybe more focused, more engaged, or are putting in harder effort? Or are you seeing something different?
It's a mix. So I would say there are some classrooms that look like any North American classroom.
Sure. Okay.
And then there are some that you walk in, you take your shoes off, you put your indoor shoes or your slippers on, and then you get to work. And
I like that.
Some have, in Germany, the students use those fountain pens. So that somehow brought the work to a different level for them in their notebooks when they were writing. I don't know how to describe that. Again, it's a cultural piece that was interesting, just like the putting your slippers on in school or walking around in your socks during math class. And then I would say overall, I did feel like the students were independent in a way that's something different than what I've seen in my teaching experience. And that was that they were sort of personally responsible for their items, for keeping their body in control in a different way than what we have had in the US. I don't know how to describe that exactly.
Do you think I think when as soon as you said that, I think I I basically linked it to what you guys were just saying before too about not being in the classroom and in the class just going on as if they they could be independent, they could take ownership of their own learning, they didn't need that teacher like with their thumb on them at all times. I wonder, and this is just a thought I had just even today, is that I wonder if we're doing this to ourselves, Are and I used to think this about parenting, is kind of like you want your kids to be more independent, but then, are you helicoptering them so that you're actually preventing them from doing that? Like we are so, Kyle, you had said this, like it was here in North America, we would be like, you can't leave the classroom because of liability. And it's like, yeah, that's true. Like we don't, we don't want to do that. But are all these rules that we're putting into place, are all these things that we're assuming kids can't learn, we have to be there to make sure that they're like on pace, getting this done. Like we're taking all this ownership away from them, And I think it feels like that to me. And I don't know if you're feeling like that here in North America too, Amy, is like, whereas maybe there are like these other countries that are saying, keeping that independence, keeping that ownership back on the learning more than us, or it's like maybe it's still hit and miss based off what classroom we're going to. But I can't help but think like, are we, if we want to create independent, thinkers, we need to like, and I think this is a Dan Meyer line, like we just need to be less helpful, like we need to like have a conscious effort that these are the things we want to do to create independent thinkers. But we have to like take a step back and go like, we're not going to like structure every second of your day or every second of your time, but we're going to help you make good decisions so that you can learn how to be independent, learn how to be a thinker. So I don't know if you're seeing that similar connection, in some of these classrooms that you're visiting.
Great point. I think it's one of those things you're raising your kids, and my
Right.
nieces and nephews are in that era of safetyism, because in the US we worry, or in North America, Canada too, we worry a lot about safety for our students, for our children. I know as a teacher, I worry, and I've overhelped probably too many students because I want them to succeed, as many of the teachers do, especially the ones that I hear on your show. And you're right. If we set them up better for that productive struggle that we keep talking about as being a necessary part of their learning, and we set parents up to understand that too, because I think that's got to be a hard balance for parents. And I hear it with you when you said like, well, I didn't
Right.
want to say anything to my kid's teacher, and then having your child try and go in and talk to the teacher, that's a hard thing too, to correct the adult. So creating that balance is tricky. I do think there are certain ways that it's inherent in the culture and in the schools, because I was at 7 o'clock in the morning in Germany on the public bus getting to the same school. Those kids were at 8 years old carrying their little Metro card to the school. I don't think I would see that
Right.
without a parent where I'm from, in Boston area. Like, I don't
Right.
think I would see that. So that inherently helps them to become independent on their own. That's just one way. And so then when they get to school, they are certainly responsible for their own belongings, their own things like that. There are students who are forgetful. I did see that, but it wasn't an issue in the class, as they just moved on. And then
Right.
students were sort of asked or expected to be differently independent insofar as having their own belongings. And if they forgot their sneakers, their mom didn't drop them off. They just didn't go to whatever that was that day, or they left it, or the sneakers were there for some other reason or something like that. Does that answer what the question you were asking?
Yeah,
That,
I think so.
Yeah. Well, and one thing that I'm, curious about, and it sounds like there's, of course, many similarities, right? We're all human, we're in different places, and there's different, cultural, sort of influences on how we learn, how we value education, how we maybe teach the mathematics. And my wonder for you is, now that you've engaged in this experience, if you were to tomorrow go back to the classroom, what would you say is maybe the biggest uh, idea, takeaway thing that you might do differently now that you've had this experience compared to before you left on this journey?
That's exactly what I'm going to be doing. I'm going into fourth grade to see how I will respond.
How do you,
Because,
and now I want you to envision it. Like, what's that going to look like,
well,
when you go
so
back?
I definitely need to foster more independence and not worry as much. I always worry about the standards, and you were talking about standards. In the US, we have the Common Core and the state standards, and Massachusetts is pretty strong on the standards and keeping aligned with our programs with that for our math. So I was like, how can I do that and do building thinking classrooms in there? Because I saw that I was invited to middle schools, 3 middle schools, which I didn't even think I would enjoy when I was away. But in one middle school, this teacher just did building thinking classrooms so well that she was in Croatia, and that we got together afterwards, because then I was doing the coaching, the teacher coaching using student-centered learning. And I said, would you want to try it? So we did it for volume and we did it for circles for her class. And so now we're going to do it back. She's going to work with me when I get back. So we're going to go continue this conversation around that to make sure that I can try and get all those building thinking classroom pieces in there, keep the math pieces going, and use what I now know about culture and how
right.
the impact of culture for equity, inclusion, language, everything. Like, it's so huge. So I want to continue that and hopefully inspire other teachers to do what I've done,
Right.
because I would like to set those up for anybody who is interested.
Love it. Love it. And I think, that's one of the, I find that one of the best parts of our careers, our jobs, is blending, blending different approaches, blending different strategies, blending different pedagogical techniques, that fit your personality, fit your students' personalities. Um, it, that's my favorite part, is trying to figure out what is going to work here today for these students, in this room, and on this on this topic even, and being creative enough to kind of bring these ideas together. And I think you're getting exposed to different things to help you formulate, like, what is the blend look like. And that's super exciting for you to kind of keep going on that journey, and learn more and more and more, so that you can come back and show us all how to blend in different ways that maybe we hadn't seen before. Amy, I want to thank you for joining us here on the podcast to share the experiences you've had so far on this journey across, sounds like, Europe right now. And
Yes.
we would love to have you back a little bit later, and see once you come back to the classroom, come back to supporting teachers who are, in your, say, in your district, what did you kind of put into place, and what does that look like now? Would you be open for that?
Absolutely. Yes. Oh, I
Awesome.
have to keep going with this, because
Awesome.
now anybody who has an Italian student, I can tell you,
Right.
they'll know money. They understand cash because they use it, but a Swedish student won't, because
Right.
nobody uses cash. So it's all those little takeaways like that I have. And
True.
if anybody's interested in doing, like, I would love to continue. I think I told you last time we talked about math pen pals. If anybody's
Yes.
interested in having
Yes.
international math pen pals,
Yeah.
I would love to connect your class with a
Awesome.
class in any of these countries
For
in
sure.
Europe I've been to.
Y-
If anybody would like help in setting up, I now have so many connections who are wanting to work with us
Yeah.
that I
Well, where
used,
can they go and learn it? I know that you've got a website and you're kind of blogging
yes,
your way through this. So let everybody know where they can go read about your adventures, and learn a little bit more about the pen pal idea.
it's World to Math, WORLD, the number 2, math.com, and my email is amyworldtomath@gmail.com. And you can
Awesome.
see me there, and you can see my blogs, and would love to, I'll set up some places so that people can reach me there
I love it. I
for
love it.
services like that.
World2math.com, the number 2. And folks, you can reach out to Amy there. Amy, it's been awesome having you here and sharing some of your experiences. Once again, thank you on behalf of the Math Moment Maker community. And hey, good luck as you gear up for this new school year back on home ground.
Yes.
All right. Thanks, Amy.
Thank you very much.